Part 1. The Wedding of Enemies. The Cathedral of Eternal Night had witnessed 3 centuries of vampire weddings, but never one conducted under armed guard. King Silas Nightborn stood at the altar in ceremonial black, his silver eyes cold as winter steel. At 34, he'd ruled the Eternal Court for over a decade, and in that time, he'd made one thing abundantly clear. He despised Lady Camilla Thorne with every fiber of his immortal being. The feeling, everyone knew, was mutual. Camilla walked down the aisle between 2 rows of witnesses who looked less like wedding guests and more like hostages. Human dignitaries on one side, vampire nobility on the other, all of them praying this forced union wouldn't explode into violence before the vows were complete. She wore white, a human tradition, but the silver daggers at her waist were pure practicality. Her family had fought the Nightborn line for 2 centuries. Her grandfather had died in a skirmish against Silas's forces. Her older brother had lost an eye in a border dispute 3 years ago. And now, she was walking toward the man responsible, about to bind herself to him for life. The silence in the cathedral was suffocating. Every footstep echoed, every breath felt loud. When Camilla reached the altar, she didn't look at Silas. He didn't look at her. They stood side by side like strangers at a funeral. Lord Chancellor Dmitri stepped forward, his ancient face carefully neutral. He'd served the Nightborn court for 200 years and had never seen anything like this. A marriage treaty, forced by both governments after a decade of escalating border conflicts, threatened to spill into full-scale war. "We are gathered," Dmitri began, his voice carrying through the stone chamber, "to witness the binding of King Silas Nightborn and Lady Camilla Thorne. This union has been decreed by both the Vampire Council and the Human Federation as a covenant of peace." Camilla's jaw tightened. Silas's expression remained carved from ice. "The conflicts between your houses have brought our peoples to the brink of war," Dmitri continued. 17 skirmishes in 10 years. Trade routes destroyed, villages evacuated. The bloodshed must end. In the audience, General Marcus Hayes of the Human Federation watched with barely concealed anxiety. He'd spent the last decade trying to prevent open war between their species. This marriage was a last resort. Chain 2 enemies together and force them to choose peace over mutual destruction. It was elegant, brutal, possibly insane. "King Silas Nightborn," Dmitri said, turning to the vampire king. "Do you take Lady Camilla Thorne as your wife, to honor this covenant, to maintain peace between your peoples, and to bind yourself to her until death?" The pops stretched. In the audience, someone coughed nervously. "I do," Silas said. His voice was flat, emotionless, the tone of a man signing his own execution order. "Lady Camilla Thorne," Dmitri continued, "do you take King Silas Nightborn as your husband, to honor this covenant, to maintain peace between your peoples, and to bind yourself to him until death?" Camilla's hands clenched at her sides. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I do." "Then by the authority vested in me by both councils, I pronounce you bound. You may seal the union." Neither of them moved. The audience held its collective breath. Finally, Silas turned to face her. Camilla turned to face him. Up close, she could see the slight scar along his jaw, a wound from their confrontation at Blackwater Ridge 5 years ago. He could see the silver pendant at her throat, blessed silver, capable of burning vampires' skin on contact. They were still armed against each other, even now. Silas leaned in. Camilla tilted her head up. Their lips met for exactly 1 second. Cold, clinical, perfunctory. The kiss of enemies forced into proximity, nothing more. When they broke apart, Camilla's expression was carefully blank. Silas's face revealed nothing. "The binding chamber awaits," Dmitri said quietly. "As per the treaty terms, you will remain sealed inside until dawn. No magic, no weapons, no escape." Camilla's eyes flickered, just for a moment, with something that might have been fear. Silas's jaw tightened fractionally. Neither spoke as they were escorted from the cathedral. Neither looked at each other as the massive iron doors of the binding chambers swung open. Neither protested as 7 locks slid into place, sealing them inside, together. Alone. For the first time in 5 years. The last time they'd been alone, Camilla had put an arrow through his shoulder. Silas had nearly broken her wrist. They'd both walked away bleeding and furious, their hatred cemented into something immovable. And now, they were married. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Camilla stood on one side, her back rigid, staring at the far wall. Silas stood on the other, his hands clasped behind him, eyes fixed on nothing. Minutes passed. Neither moved, neither spoke. Outside, the witnesses dispersed, shaking their heads. Some muttered prayers. Others placed bets on how long before someone each down. Treaty be damned. Inside, the tension stretched like a wire pulled too tight. Camilla's breathing was carefully controlled. Silas's posture was perfectly still. The space between them felt like a chasm, impossible to cross. 5 minutes became 10. 10 became 15. Then, so quietly it was almost inaudible, Silas spoke. "They're gone." Camilla didn't turn. "I know." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you going to look at me?" His voice was different now, softer, missing the cold edge from the ceremony. "I don't know if I can." Her words were tight, strained. "If I look at you, I might—" She didn't finish. She didn't need to. Silas took 1 step forward, then another, crossing the impossible distance between them with careful, deliberate movements, like approaching something wild and precious and terrified. Camilla, her name. Not Lady Thorne, not spoken with venom or formality, just her name. Low and rough and full of something that had been hidden for far too long. She turned. Her green eyes were bright with unshed tears. His silver ones were raw with an emotion that had no place between enemies. "We did it," she whispered. "We did it," he confirmed. And then she was moving, and he was moving, and they collided in the center of the room with the force of a decade of suppressed longing. His hands tangled in her hair. Hers grabbed his shoulders. The kiss was nothing like the ceremony. This was desperate, drowning, devastating. This was real. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Camilla pressed her forehead against his chest. Her whole body was shaking. 10 years, she said, her voice breaking. 10 years of pretending I hated you. 10 years of watching you across battlefields and wanting to run to you instead of this, Silas finished. His arms tightened around her. I know. God, Camilla, I know. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Really look at him. The face she'd memorized in stolen moments. The man she'd loved in secret since she was 18 years old. Did anyone suspect? No. His hand cupped her face with infinite gentleness. Your performance was perfect. Mine too. They all believe we're enemies locked in mutual torment. We are locked in mutual torment. Her smile was tremulous. Just not the kind they think. No, he agreed. Not the kind they think. She kissed him again, slower this time, savoring it. 10 years of stolen moments and hidden meetings had led to this. 10 years of carefully orchestrated border skirmishes and public confrontations. 10 years of sacrifice. And now they had forever, legally, publicly, together. Tell me, Camilla said eventually, still wrapped in his arms, that this is real, that we're really married, that I'm not dreaming. You're not dreaming. Silas pressed a kiss to her temple. You're my wife. I'm your husband. And everyone who tried to keep us apart just handed us exactly what we wanted. We manipulated 2 governments. We saved 2 governments from a war neither could afford. We staged 17 skirmishes. We prevented 17 battles. She laughed, the sound half relief, half hysteria. We're either geniuses or completely insane. Both, Silas said. Definitely both. They stood there, holding each other in the binding chamber that was meant to be their prison, but had become their sanctuary. Outside, the world believed they were suffering. Inside, they were finally, impossibly free. Part 2. The Cost of Conspiracy. They'd made it to the bed eventually, though neither was willing to let go long enough to actually sleep. Camilla lay tucked against Silas's side, his fingers tracing absent patterns on her shoulder. Do you remember, she said quietly, the first time we met? Silas's hand stilled. The Treaty of Frostholm. You were 18. I was terrified. She looked up at him. I'd heard the stories. The vampire king who'd ruled for a decade. Ruthless, cold, dangerous. My father warned me not to make eye contact, not to speak unless spoken to. And instead? Instead, you asked my opinion on agricultural subsidies, and I was so surprised, I forgot to be afraid. A slight smile touched his lips. You told me the Vampire Territory's grain distribution system was inefficient and outdated. It was. It was, he agreed. You were brilliant, sharp, unafraid once you started talking. I couldn't stop watching you. I thought you were just being diplomatic. I was being captivated. His expression grew serious. After that summit, I couldn't stop thinking about you. This fierce young woman who looked me in the eye and told me I was wrong, and treated me like a person instead of a monster. Camilla's fingers found his, intertwining. When did you know? That I loved you? The Harvest Moon Festival, 2 years after Frostholm. He paused. You were dancing with some human lord. I don't even remember his name. But I remember watching you laugh and feeling something crack in my chest. This ache, this want, and knowing I could never have you. Because our families hated each other. Because our peoples had been at war for 200 years. Because you were human nobility and I was vampire royalty. Because every law and custom and political reality made us impossible. His voice dropped. And because I knew that if I pursued you, I'd be putting you in danger. Camilla was quiet for a moment. The night you kissed me, at the Summit of Shadows, 5 years after we met. You cornered me in that abandoned library. You looked haunted, thin. I'd heard rumors you weren't feeding properly. She touched his face gently. I was worried about you. I couldn't feed, Silas admitted. Every vampire I encountered felt wrong. Like trying to eat when you're not hungry. Like settling for something that isn't what you need. He caught her hand, pressed a kiss to her palm. I needed you, but I couldn't have you. So I just stopped trying. That's when I knew we had to do something. When I saw you destroying yourself because we couldn't be together. Her voice was fierce. That's when I decided I didn't care about laws or politics or impossibility. I was in love with you, and I wasn't going to let the world keep us apart. So you kissed me. So I kissed you, and you kissed me back. And we stood in that dusty library and admitted we were completely, impossibly in love with each other. Silas remembered that moment with perfect clarity. The moonlight through broken windows. Camilla's face, determined and beautiful, and terrified. The feel of her lips on his. The moment his world shifted on its axis. We spent 3 months planning, he said, before we did anything. Just planning. You were so careful. Every detail mapped out. I had to be. One mistake, and we'd start a real war. One slip, and people would die. His jaw tightened. The plan had to be perfect. Camilla shifted, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him properly. Tell me again. I need to hear it. That we did the right thing. Silas met her eyes. This was the question that haunted them both. The weight of what they'd done. We staged 17 border skirmishes over 10 years, he said quietly. Small confrontations, carefully controlled. I commanded every vampire force personally. You coordinated every human response. We made sure no one died. A few injuries. Minor injuries, treatable wounds, nothing fatal. His hand cupped her face. We scared people. We disrupted trade. We made both governments desperate enough to force a marriage treaty. But we didn't kill anyone, Camilla. Not once. We manipulated them. We gave them what they needed. Before our conflict started, tensions between humans and vampires were genuinely escalating. Small disputes were turning into larger ones. Within another few years, there would have been real war. Uncontrolled war. So we controlled it, Camilla said slowly. We gave them a target, made them focus on us instead of each other. Exactly. We channeled their aggression inward, created a narrative where peace through marriage was the obvious solution. He paused. Was it manipulation? Yes. But it was manipulation that prevented thousands of deaths. Camilla was quiet, processing. The first skirmish at Silverbrook Pass. That was terrifying. You were brilliant. Your archers fired warning shots. My soldiers responded with defensive positions. It looking real, but everyone went home alive. Barely. That one vampire, Victor, he almost went too far. I handled Victor. Silas's voice went cold. He understood that Folks was non-negotiable. And my brother Marcus, when he lost his eye. That was an accident. Silas's expression filled with genuine remorse. Not planned, not supposed to happen. One of my younger vampires panicked during the Blackwater confrontation. I know. Camilla touched his jaw. I know you didn't plan it, but it made it so much harder. Having to look at Marcus's face and know that our plan, our conspiracy, had cost him. Does he suspect? No. If anything, it made him hate you more, which made my hatred more believable. She closed her eyes briefly. The guilt, though, that's the part that keeps me awake. We could have walked away, Silas said seriously. At any point. After the first skirmish, after the second, after Marcus got hurt. We could have stopped. But we didn't. Because we believed the alternative was worse. Real war, uncontrolled chaos, thousands dead. He pulled her closer. We made a choice, Camilla, a hard one, a morally complicated one. But I stand by it. Even with the guilt? Even with the guilt. His eyes met hers. Because we're here, married, legal, and our peoples are at peace. That matters. She nodded slowly, then nestled back against him. They lay in silence for a while, the weight of 10 years settling between them. Tell me about the Crimson Woods confrontation, Camilla said eventually. That's the one that scared me most. Silas's arms tightened fractionally. That was too close. We'd pushed too hard, escalated too fast. Both our armies were genuinely on edge. I remember standing across that clearing, watching you. You looked so cold, so dangerous. For a moment, I almost believed our own performance. That was the point when I realized we were playing with fire, Silas admitted. We'd spent years controlling the narrative, but armies have their own momentum. Soldiers get caught up in the tension. One wrong move, and it all could have spiraled. But it didn't. But it barely didn't. I placing my forces back at the last second. You ordered your archers to stand down. We both knew. That of our closest call. That's when the councils started seriously discussing a marriage treaty, Camilla remembered. General Hayes told me the Federation was terrified. He said you and I were going to destroy everything. Lord Dimitri said the same to me. He practically begged me to consider peace negotiations. So we let them beg, let them panic, let them come up with the marriage solution themselves. Exactly. We never suggested it, Never push for it. We just created the conditions where it became the obvious answer. Camilla was quiet for a moment. Silas, do you think Dmitri suspects? He considered it. He's ancient, cunning. If anyone would career it out, it would be him. That's not an answer. No, I don't think he suspects. Not yet. But we need to be careful. Very Carishiation. One slip, careful. How long do we have to keep pretending? Forever, Silas said simply. If anyone discovers the truth, that we orchestrated this entire decade of conflict, both governments would see it as treason. They'd annul the marriage, execute us for conspiracy. Dramatic. Accurate. He kissed her forehead. We have to maintain the performance publicly. Be croned, distant. The reluctant couple bound by treaty. I can do that, Camilla said, though her voice was tight. I've been doing it for 10 years. But here, Silas said, gesturing to the chamber. In private, we're ourselves. We're real. Until someone finds out. No one've been today. Camilla wanted to believe him, but a small voice in the back of her mind whispered, secrets this big never stay buried forever. Part 3. The Performance. 3 months into the marriage, the palace had settled into an uncomfortable routine. Queen Camilla, she still advocates that title, occupied the West Wing. King Silas remained in his traditional chambers in the East Tower. They attended state functions together when required, sitting at opposite ends of tables, speaking only when necessary. To everyone watching, they were the picture of a failed political marriage, bound by law, but separated by genuine animosity. What no one knew was that Silas had quietly commissioned a hidden passage connecting their chambers during the first month. What no one saw were the nights Camilla slipped through that passage to fall asleep in her husband's arms. What no one heard were the quiet conversations, the stolen laughter, the whispered declarations of love. Today was a council meeting. Camilla arrived precisely on time, dressed in deep blue, her expression professionally neutral. She took her seat at the far end of the long table from Silas. Their eyes met briefly, just long enough for him to notice she'd worn the silver pendant he'd given her, hidden beneath her collar. Their secret signal. I love you. His fingers tapped once against the table edge. Their return signal. I love you too. Then both their masks were back in place. Lord Pemberton droned on about trade negotiations. General Hayes updated them on border security. Lady Helena presented agricultural reports. All routine. All boring. Until Lord Chancellor Dmitri cleared his throat. There is one additional matter, he said, his ancient eyes moving between Silas and Camilla. The councils have requested an update on the state of the royal marriage. The room went very quiet. Camilla's expression didn't change, but Silas saw her hand tighten fractionally on her pen. I'm not sure what update they require, she said coolly. The treaty terms have been fulfilled. We're married. Yes, Dmitri said carefully. However, there are concerns about the long-term stability of the arrangement. Meaning? Silas's voice was cold. Meaning, Your Majesty, that a marriage in name only serves the treaty's letter, but not its spirit. The councils hoped that time together might soften certain hostilities. The councils, Camilla said with ice in her voice, forced this marriage on us. They can hardly expect affection to bloom from coercion. No one expects affection, General Hayes interjected quickly. But perhaps cooperation, partnership. You both want peace, surely. I want to honor the treaty, Camilla said. Beyond that, my personal feelings are my own concern. Silas leaned back in his chair, his posture deceptively casual. The Queen is correct. We've fulfilled our legal obligations. If the councils expected more, they should have specified it in the treaty terms. Dimitri's expression was unreadable. Very well. I will relay your commitment to the treaty's letter to the councils. The meeting continued, but the tension remained. When it finally ended, Camilla stood immediately, gathering her papers. Queen Camilla, Dimitri said quietly. A word. She paused, her jaw tightening, but nodded. Of course, Chancellor. Silas watched her go, his expression carefully neutral, while something cold coiled in his chest. Dimitri was too perceptive, too observant. If he suspected anything. But no, they'd been too careful. 10 years of perfect performance. No one knew. No one could know. In a private antechamber, Dimitri faced Camilla with an expression she couldn't read. Your Majesty, he said. May I speak frankly? You're the Chancellor. You may speak however you wish. I've served the Nightborn court for 2 centuries. I've watched many marriages, political and otherwise. I've seen hatred. I've seen indifference. I've seen love pretending to be duty. Camilla's heart was beating too fast, but her face remained calm. Is there a point to this history lesson, Chancellor? Just this. Dimitri's eyes were sharp. I've also seen guilt. And when I look at you and King Silas, sitting at opposite ends of that council table, I see 2 people carrying the weight of something heavy. We're carrying the weight of a forced marriage, Camilla said flatly. That tends to be heavy. Perhaps. He paused. Or perhaps you're carrying the weight of something else. Something that started long before this marriage was decreed. The air left Camilla's lungs, but she held his gaze, refusing to break. I don't know what you're implying, Chancellor. I'm not implying anything. I'm observing. He moved to the window, looking out at the palace grounds. You and King Silas fought 17 skirmishes over 10 years. Small conflicts, carefully contained. Strange, isn't it? How controlled they were. How no one ever died. We were fortunate. Or careful. He turned back to her. A decade of conflict that escalated just enough to alarm both governments, but never enough to trigger real war. A perfect crescendo leading to a marriage treaty that solved an impossible problem for 2 people who... He trailed off, watching her. Camilla's mind was racing. Deny? Deflect? Attack? She forced her expression to remain cold. Chancellor, if you have an accusation to make it. Otherwise, I have matters to attend to. Dimitri studied her for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. No accusation, Your Majesty. Just an observation. And perhaps Respect. Respect? For anyone clever enough to achieve the impossible while making it look inevitable. He moved toward the door, then paused. Your secret is safe. I have no intention of sharing my suspicions with anyone. Camilla's carefully maintained composure cracked. Why? Because the peace is real, whatever its origin. Because you've harmed no one in your pursuit of it. And because he looked at her with something that might have been kindness. Because I'm old enough to remember when love was considered more important than politics. Perhaps it still should be. Then he was gone, leaving Camilla standing alone, her heart pounding. He knew. Dear God, Dmitri knew. That night, in the hidden passage between their chambers, Camilla told Silas everything. He listened in silence, his expression growing more tense with every word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. He won't tell anyone, Silas said finally. You can't know that. I can. Dmitri is many things, but he's not cruel. And he's not stupid. If he wanted to expose us, he would have done it publicly in the council meeting. Instead, he spoke to you privately. Gave us a warning and a promise. But he knows, Silas. He knows everything. He suspects. There's a difference. Silas pulled her close. And even if he knows for certain, he just told you he won't reveal it. We're safe. Are we? Camilla's voice was small. Because it feels like everything is falling apart. Nothing is falling apart. We're married, legal. The treaty is solid. He tilted her face up to his. We did it, Camilla. We won. Then why do I feel like we're still hiding? Because we are still hiding. We'll always be hiding. His expression was serious. That was always part of the plan. We can be together, but we can't ever let the world know how we got here. For the rest of our lives? For the rest of our lives. Camilla closed her eyes, leaning into him. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it. Do you really? She opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. Silver and green, vampire and human, husband and wife. No, she admitted. I don't. I love you too much to regret anything. I love you too. He kissed her softly. And that, my brilliant, impossible wife, is worth every secret we have to keep. Part 4. Cracks and Consequences. 6 months into the marriage, the cracks began to show. Not in their private relationship. That remained solid, loving, a sanctuary against the world. But in their public performance, small things started to slip. Lady Helena noticed that when Queen Camilla spoke in council meetings, King Silas listened with unusual attention. Not hostility, attention. General Hayes noticed that their Majesties' arguments had become almost playful. Sharp, yes, but lacking genuine venom. The servants whispered that the Queen smiled more now, that the King seemed less cold. Small things, insignificant individually. But Lord Dmitri noticed everything. He said nothing, made no accusations, but he watched with the patience of someone who'd lived 2 centuries and could afford to wait. And then, 8 months into the marriage, everything nearly fell apart. It was a state dinner. Representatives from both the Human Federation and Vampire Council were present. Formal, important, a display of the peace their forced marriage had created. Camilla wore green, Silas's favorite color on her, though no one else knew that. Silas wore silver cufflinks she'd given him secretly the week before. They sat at opposite ends of the long table, as always, professionally distant, as always. The dinner proceeded normally. Pleasant conversation, diplomatic small talk, all very civilized. Until Lady Margot, a vampire noble with more ambition than sense, decided to test the waters. "Your Majesty," she said, addressing Silas with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I hear the Queen has been spending considerable time in the palace library. How studious of her." It was a subtle jab, implying Camilla was avoiding him, hiding in books instead of fulfilling wifely duties. Silas's expression remained neutral. "The Queen enjoys reading. I encourage it." "How progressive of you," Lady Margot continued. "Though I wonder, does she read to escape her present circumstances? I imagine the marriage must be quite trying for her." The table went quiet. This was dangerous territory. Camilla set down her wine glass carefully. "Lady Margot, you seem very concerned with how I spend my time. Should I be flattered or suspicious?" "Neither, Your Majesty. Simply curious. We all wonder how you manage, being bound to—" She gestured delicately toward Silas. "Well, your sworn enemy." "I manage," Camilla said coldly, "the same way I've managed every difficult situation in my life, with grace and determination." "Of course, though it must be lonely, maintaining separate chambers, separate lives. One might wonder what the point of marriage is if—" "If what?" Silas's voice cut across the table like a blade. "If the Queen and I choose to honor each other's privacy? If we conduct our marriage in a manner that suits us, rather than satisfying your curiosity?" Lady Margot's smile faltered. "I meant no offense, Your Majesty." "And yet you gave it." He stood, his presence suddenly dominating the room. "My wife has been nothing but gracious since our marriage. She attends every state function, fulfills every treaty obligation, comports herself with dignity despite being forced into an impossible situation. If you find fault with that, Lady Margot, perhaps the problem lies with your expectations, rather than her behavior." The room was silent. Everyone stared. Camilla stared too, because Silas had just defended her. Publicly, passionately, in front of everyone. Their eyes met across the length of the table. His expression was fierce, protective, completely exposed. Hers was shocked, grateful, terrified. They'd just made a mistake. Silas seemed to realize it the same moment she did. His mask slammed back into place. "The Queen is my wife," he said more coldly. "Insults to her are insults to me and to the treaty. I won't tolerate it." He sat back down. The dinner continued, stilted and awkward. But the damage was done. People had seen. Dimitri had seen. Hayes had seen. The Vampire King had defended his supposedly hated human wife with genuine anger. That night, in their hidden passage, Camilla pressed her hands against Silas's chest. "That was stupid," she whispered. "I know." "You just showed everyone you care about me." "I know." "Silas," she ensinfled you. His Jonah was tight. "In my court, At my table. I couldn't just sit there and— You had to. Camilla's voice was urgent. That's the whole point of the performance. We hatred each other, remember? I remember. He closed his eyes. But when she started implying you were miserable, that the marriage was torture for you, something as me just snapped. We've been so careful for 10 years. I know. And you just threw it away because someone was rude at dinner? I know. He pulled back, running his hands through his hair. Damn it, Camilla, I know. It was stupid, reckless, dangerous. But I love you, and I can't watch people insult you without reacting. She stared at him, her anger warring with understanding. We have to be more careful. We will be. No more public defenses, no matter what anyone says. Agreed. And we need to do some damage control. Stage a fight or something. Remind everyone we're enemies. Silas nodded reluctantly. Tomorrow, the garden. We'll make sure we're overheard arguing. Make it believable. It will be. He pulled her close, his forehead against hers. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know. She kissed him softly. But we can't afford mistakes like that. Not if we want to keep this. We'll keep it, Silas promised. Whatever it takes. The next day, they staged their most convincing fight yet. In the palace gardens, voices raised, accusations flying. Servants heard, guards witnessed. Word spread quickly. The king and queen were still enemies. Nothing had changed. The performance was back on track. But Lord Dimitri, watching from a distance, simply smiled. Because he'd seen Silas's face at that dinner. He'd seen the genuine fury when Lady Margot insulted Camilla. He'd seen love, barely disguised as propriety. And he knew, with absolute certainty now, that his suspicions were correct. King Silas and Queen Camilla weren't enemies forced together. They never had been. This entire decade of conflict had been an elaborate performance leading to exactly this moment. It was brilliant, insane, audacious. And Dimitri was going to keep their secret. Because peace was real, the treaty was solid, and love, true love, was rare enough that it deserved protection, even when it came wrapped in conspiracy. He said nothing, did nothing, simply watched as two people who'd moved heaven and earth to be together continued their careful dance. Some secrets, he thought, were worth keeping. Part 5. The Truth Revealed. 9 months into the marriage, Lord Dimitri requested a private audience with both their majesties. Camilla's hands were shaking when she received the summons. Silas's expression was carved from stone. They'd known this was coming since the dinner incident. They'd prepared for it. But preparation didn't make it less terrifying. They arrived at Dimitri's private study separately, maintaining appearances even now. The Chancellor waited, a bottle of very old wine open on his desk. Please, he said, gesturing to the chairs. Sit. They sat, as far apart as the furniture allowed. Silas's face was cold. Camilla's was carefully neutral. Dimitri poured 3 glasses of wine in silence. Then he sat back, studying them with ancient eyes. I'm going to tell you a story, he said. And when I'm finished, you're going to tell me if I'm correct. Neither of them spoke. Once upon a time, Dimitri began, there was a vampire king who met a young human noble at a peace summit. He was captivated by her intelligence. She was fascinated by his unexpected kindness. But they came from families with centuries of hostility between them. They were impossible. Camilla's breathing had gone very still. They met again, and again. Over years. They fell in love. But love wasn't enough. Politics, prejudice, and history stood between them. No one would ever allow a marriage. It was unthinkable. Silas's jaw tightened. So they did something remarkable, Dmitri continued. They decided that if marriage was unthinkable, they'd make it inevitable. They began staging conflicts, small skirmishes, carefully controlled, just enough to alarm both governments without triggering real war. Camilla's hands clenched in her lap. 17 confrontations over 10 years, each one escalating slightly, each one perfectly calculated. They became the faces of the conflict, two enemies who hated each other with visceral public intensity. The vampire king and the human noble, whose personal vendetta threatened to burn the world down. Silas said nothing, but his silver eyes were locked on Dmitri. Eventually, both governments panicked. Desperate to prevent war, they mandated the one solution that could bind these enemies: a marriage treaty. And the king and the noble, who'd orchestrated the entire scenario, finally got exactly what they'd wanted all along. The silence stretched. Each other, Dmitri finished softly. Camilla's eyes were bright with unshed tears. Silas's expression had cracked, showing the fear beneath. Now, Dmitri said, tell me, am I correct? They looked at each other, a whole conversation in that glance. Deny? Admit? Run? Finally, Silas spoke. His voice was rough. Why are you asking if you already know? Because I want to hear you say it. Another pause. Then Camilla, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, you're correct. Dmitri nodded slowly. How long? We met 12 years ago, Silas said quietly, at Frostholm. We fell in love 5 years after that, started planning the campaign, choosing after. 10 years of staging conflicts. 10 years of controlled skirmishes, Camilla corrected. No deaths. We made sure. Every confrontation was carefully managed. Your brother's eye? An accident. Silas's voice was tight with guilt. Not planned. One of my younger vampires panicked. I've never comparing myself for that. Dmitri was quiet for a long moment, processing. You manipulated 2 governments, staged a decade of conflict, convinced the world you were enemies, all to force a marriage treaty. Yes, Silas said simply. That's... Dmitri paused, searching for words. Audacious. Brilliant. Completely insane. All 3, Camilla agreed. Her voice was shaking. Are you going to expose us? Expose you? Dmitri looked genuinely surprised. Why would I do that? Because we lied, Silas said, to everyone, for years. We committed conspiracy on a massive scale. You prevented a war, Dmitri corrected. Before your conflicts started, Tensions between our peoples were genuinely escalating. Within a few years, there would have been open hostilities, uncontrolled violence. Thousands would have died. "You can't know that," Camilla whispered. "I'm 200 years old. I've seen it before." Dmitri leaned forward. "What you did was manipulation, yes, but it was manipulation that channeled aggression into controlled channels. You gave both governments a clear problem with an obvious solution, and in doing so, you created real peace." "We did it for selfish reasons," Silas said. "We wanted to be together. And you found a way to achieve that while saving countless lives. I fail to see the problem." They stared at him, not quite believing what they were hearing. "You're not going to tell anyone?" Camilla asked. "Why would I? The peace is real. The treaty is solid, and you've harmed no one, your brother's injury aside, which was genuinely accidental." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I've grown rather fond of you both. It would be a shame to see you executed for treason." "We appreciate that," Silas said dryly, though relief was evident in his voice. Dmitri stood, moving to the window. "However, I do have some advice." "Which is?" "Stop being so careful." He turned back to them. "You've won. You're married. Legal. The treaty is secured. You don't have to keep pretending to hate each other." "People will suspect," Camilla began. "Let them suspect," Dmitri interrupted. "What are they going to do? Annul a treaty that's kept the peace for 9 months? Accuse you of what, exactly? Falling in love with your spouse? That's not a crime." "But if they figure out we orchestrated everything?" "They won't, because I'm the only one old enough, cunning enough, and close enough to the situation to have pieced it together. And I'm not telling anyone." He smiled. "But you don't have to sleep in separate wings. You don't have to sit at opposite ends of tables. You can simply be a married couple who've learned to tolerate, perhaps even like, each other." Silas and Camilla looked at each other again. Hope, tentative and fragile, bloomed between them. "Slowly," Silas said. "We'd have to change slowly. Make it look like a gradual thawing." "Exactly," Dmitri agreed. "Over the next few months, be slightly less hostile. Share a few civil conversations. Eventually, move into shared chambers. Let people think the forced proximity has created, if not love, at least partnership." "They'd believe that?" Camilla asked. "They'll believe what they see. And what they'll see is two intelligent people making the best of a difficult situation." Dmitri's expression grew serious. "You've carried this secret for 10 years. You've performed brilliantly. But secrets that heavy, they poison things eventually. Let some of the truth out, not the conspiracy, but the love. Let yourselves be happy." Tears spilled down Camilla's cheeks. Silas's hand moved instinctively toward her, then stopped, years of habit holding him back. "Go ahead," Dmitri said gently. "I already know." Silas crossed the distance between them and pulled Camilla into his arms. She buried her face in his shoulder, her whole body shaking with relief. He held her tightly, his own eyes bright. "Thank you," Silas said to Dmitri, his voice rough. "For understanding. for keeping our secret." "Thank you," Dmitri said, "for preventing a war, even if you did it for selfish reasons." He raised his wine glass. "To love and to peace, however they're achieved." Epilogue. 1 year later. The anniversary celebration of the treaty was a grand affair. Representatives from both governments gathered to commemorate 1 year of peace achieved through the marriage of King Silas and Queen Camilla. Speeches were given, toasts were made. Everyone congratulated themselves on the wisdom of forced diplomacy. But those who'd been paying attention noticed changes. Their Majesties sat together now, not at opposite ends of tables. They conversed quietly during boring speeches. They shared chambers. Everyone knew that, though no one mentioned it directly. The transformation had been gradual, a slow thaw over months. First civility, then cooperation, then something that looked remarkably like partnership. Some people whispered that they'd fallen in love. Others scoffed. Love between enemies? Impossible. More likely, they'd simply learned to tolerate each other. Only Lord Dmitri knew the truth, and he smiled, watching them, saying nothing. After the formal celebration ended, Silas and Camilla retreated to their private chambers, the ones they now shared openly. No more hidden passages. No more sneaking between wings. Camilla kicked off her formal shoes and collapsed onto their bed with a dramatic sigh. That was exhausting. Silas loosened his collar, joining her. General Hayes cornered me for 20 minutes about trade negotiations. Lady Margot asked me, with complete sincerity, if I'd grown to tolerate you. Camilla laughed. I told her you were surprisingly bearable, once one got past the initial vampire terror. Generous of you. I thought so. She rolled onto her side to face him. Can you believe it's been a year? A year of being publicly married, 12 years of being privately in love, 10 years of conspiracy. He touched her face gently. Worth every moment. Even the guilt? Even the guilt. His expression grew serious. We did what we had to do. We prevented a war. We're together. That matters. Dmitri says we're heroes in our own twisted way. Dmitri is wise. Silas pulled her closer. And he's right. We don't have to hide anymore. We can this be us. A vampire king and his human queen who fell in love and moved heaven and earth to be together. Exactly that. Camilla kissed him softly. I love you. I love you too. He smiled against her lips. My brilliant, impossible co-conspirator wife. My ridiculous, overdramatic, secret-keeping husband. They lay there, wrapped around each other, no longer hiding. The world believed they'd learned to tolerate each other. Let them believe it. The truth, that they'd orchestrated an entire decade of conflict to manipulate two governments into mandating their marriage, was safe with Dmitri. And it would stay safe. Some secrets were worth keeping. But some truths, like the fact that they loved each other, were worth finally, carefully, revealing. Outside their window, the moon rose over the palace. Inside, two people who'd fought the world for the right to be together simply held each other, grateful and whole. They'd won. And this time, they didn't have to pretend otherwise.